Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey folks, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Brian Blaushild, president of Famous Supply. Now, Famous is a fourth generation plumbing and HVAC distribution company. As you hear, they've got multiple locations. And it was just a pleasure catching up with Brian. And he just recently became president. Actually, was given this position earlier this year. And it's just kind of been fun. He had a little bit of a non-traditional start in the organization, and he's kind of come up through the ranks. They are very much a promote from within type of organization. But one of the things we really dove into was something called the 40 fundamentals. And it's kind of their guiding principles, I think is the best way to put it, through the organization. They definitely have, their core values, but this goes a little bit beyond this. And what it really does is tie all the associates together. And you'll hear how we talk about each, three of them that we highlighted. But if you get an opportunity just to go to their website, and look up Famous Supply, and then down near the bottom, they talk about, about us. It's the 40 fundamentals. And it's one of those things that, man, I would love to see other organizations articulate. What do you actually believe in? Because this is what creates trust in the associates and really makes a cohesive organization. This is really important as these companies expand, beyond their, maybe they had a modest geography of, 10 to 15, 20 stores at most. And then all of a sudden you're doubling that. What happens to your culture when that occurs? But hopefully you all get as much as I did out of some of these core fundamentals. So anyway, I enjoyed the conversation with Brian, and I really hope you all do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by NSQL Distribution Software. NSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than NSQL Distribution Software at www.nsql.com. That's INXSQL.com. Well, hey, Brian. Hey, thanks for taking the time. Welcome to Distribution Talk. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. My pleasure. So if we could, I'd love to go a little bit into the history. Now, first of all, when did you become president? When was that announcement made? Was it last year?
It was actually earlier this year, so probably about 3 or 4 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it is a brand new set of shoes here, but probably not too new. I mean, you kind of were gearing up for this, I suspect.
It's been funny. I've been with Famous now for 14 years now. Actually, I celebrated my 14th year anniversary yesterday. And in a family business, I guess there's kind of this expectation that, the children are going to be the ones that will take the role or the leap. And, I think that's something I always aspired to, but wanted to make sure that I went through as many steps as I could and had as many roles in the company as possible.
Sure.
And I always said to my dad or any other people that would listen, if you guys ever think there's somebody that's more capable or, don't think that I've earned it, I do not want any role that I don't think I've earned or should get. And I'm very close to my dad and my grandpa when he was alive. And it's been nice them putting the trust in me to kind of go through different roles and different career pivots in my career at Famous. And I'm really appreciative of all the experiences they gave me to help me get to this point where they felt comfortable making that call.
So if we could, let's step back a little further. I mean, because again, I grew up in my family business too, kind of came in as that second generation. So when did you start? I mean, were you conscripted into child labor? I mean,
no.
Brought in.
Yeah, it was funny. I was with somebody yesterday actually that works for Famous, and they said, you were probably working there when you were a child. And I never actually worked at Famous as a kid.
Okay.
No, and I actually really didn't even know too much about what Famous was growing up. We live in Cleveland, and Famous were headquartered in Akron. So before Route 8 was a good thing, it took my dad about an hour to get to work.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a little bit closer, 35 minutes with some of the new highways. But back then it was like an hour and 15 minutes. And when I was a kid, I worked every fall, winter, summer, but it was always local. I started at McDonald's at 14, working, I think, 16 hours a week because that was the child law at the time.
That was a legal limit, yeah.
14-year-olds could work up to 16 hours a week. So my mom or dad would drop me off at McDonald's, and that was where I worked. And I worked as a day camp counselor. I worked at tons of other odds and ends jobs, golf caddying, but yeah, never worked really at Famous. I always kind of knew what Famous was kind of tangentially. At the time we had a Famous, we called it our Tri-State Expo. It was a big convention where we would bring in hundreds of vendors, thousands of customers would come in for this 2-day event. It was at the Cleveland IX Center. So I got to go to that when I was a kid, and we actually did company trips where we would take customers on trips. So I attended those as a child, but I never worked in the warehouse or did much of that when I was a kid growing up.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because a lot of the next generation, folks in these businesses, definitely. I mean, I started when I was 13. Yanked into the warehouse, cleaning shelves and pulling orders, things like that. So when was that kind of point when you were introduced to the company as it is, now?
Yeah. So, when I was growing up, because I didn't know too much about what Famous did, it wasn't like some kids, they work in a family business and they grow to hate it when they're 10, 12, 14 years old because they're like, I don't want to work there. I had no animosity. I really had no preconceived ideas. And it wasn't until I was a sophomore in college, after my freshman year going into my sophomore year, I did a summer internship, and it was more out of curiosity. And I remember, still coming in, the first day of summer, and you started to understand the scale and the scope of what we did. And it was kind of cool to see my dad and my grandfather, who I obviously, grew up with. Yeah. I didn't get to interact with them in a business environment per se. So to see the way that they operated and how they ran the company and how they treated associates and how they interacted with customers, it was cool to see because I got to see my grandpa in a way I never saw him growing up. I mean, I saw him as my loving grandfather would take me to, Indians games and come to my baseball games, but I didn't think of him as a businessman. He was just my grandpa. Yeah. And I think it was that summer where I just said, this is what I want to do. I want to do what they do because they loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's really interesting coming in as more of an adult. You're seeing the business as an adult, whereas again, many of us came in and we didn't know any better. I mean, we just kind of went into this and we were just indoctrinated, and we didn't get that opportunity to have that independent thought and that those independent experiences before, joining or kind of seeing what the organization really was. So,
yeah, definitely a different approach than many take, but I'm very appreciative of my dad's approach. And it was, I didn't feel pushed. I didn't feel pressured. I didn't feel like this was something I had to do. But I think by keeping me a little at arm's length, it made me want it versus feeling like I had to do it.
Well, I think you mentioned curiosity. And I think that is absolutely what that approach kind of gave you, is that curiosity about the business. And no, I actually think it's a brilliant, way to look at it with kids, because there's so many companies that have no idea how to onboard their children, and to get their kids interested. I mean, I look at, my niece and nephew, with my brother in a very, similar family structure and family business structure, and they have no interest in the business. So, I like the way that you all went about that. I mean, I think that's a tremendous way. Yeah. So, by the way, what was that kind of, when you interned, when you came in, what was that first job? What did you do?
So besides myself, we hired two other, I went to Miami of Ohio. It was me and then two other interns from Miami. So we were a 3-person team, and my brother at the time, he was still in high school, but he decided to work for Famous that summer as well. And the 4 of us actually worked on Famous University, which is our current customer training, associate training kind of umbrella organization. At the time, it was more of an idea. We were doing a lot of training classes, but we really wanted to put together more of an all-encompassing program. So when we came in, a lot of our time was spent on meeting with customers, meeting with associates, really trying to understand the marketplace of what training was available to contractors and how Famous could put together a program that was all-encompassing. And it was a really good learning experience. I think we put together after, the course of a summer, some really high level recommendations. It was almost like a consulting internship, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice because, the four of us had never worked at Famous, had very limited interaction with contractors. So we were kind of the dummies playing outsiders. And it was a great learning experience for those 2-3 months.
Absolutely. Oh, no, I think that's a brilliant, if you look at it, again, non-traditional for sure, for sure. But as you said, you really had no preconceived notions. And I think that made that research, really fruitful. I remember I met a guy a while back, Dr. Adam Fine, and I remember him getting up on stage though and saying, it's not research if you already know the answers.
Yeah.
And I think that's what allowed you to really, go and ask those questions because you didn't know the answers.
Correct. We had no idea. When I think we started, I didn't even really understand that Famous did training. So, you're really starting at square one, and then it's okay. What training do customers want? Do we have the resources to provide it? We toggled from ideas, paying for class or paying subscriptions or memberships.
Yeah.
Really, things that might sound silly, to us weren't silly because, we had no idea what the industry norms were. It was a great experience.
Yeah, and you didn't have some of those biases because I think in a lot of companies, we tend to give away services for free. This is a very common, and training is one of those things that tends to be a free service, and not having that bias, at least you could, intelligently ask the question, should we charge for these services? Should we, give them away? Obviously, you're not going to charge your associates, but the contractor, your customer world, are you going to charge it? I guess my question, an easy follow-up is, do you charge now in this university setting?
So the program's evolved dramatically since when we did it. And, we have a ton of different offerings. Some we charge for, some we don't. Mm-hmm. Some are industry specific, some are manufacturer specific. So it all kind of depends.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Again, looking at transition plans, I'm going to step back into the generational thing here. Transition plans. When did that start? I guess, when did that begin with you and your dad?
So my dad, he's a planner. He's very thoughtful about everything that he does. Mm-hmm. And he really prides himself on trying to think 5, 10, 15, 20 years out.
Right.
So, he was part of a Vistage group for a number of years that really helped him with planning. And it wasn't always planning for even him, but for every role in our leadership team. When we were very small, we never had a CIO. Now we have a CIO. We never, so as you grow and get bigger, you have to add new roles, come up with new teams. And I think he was always kind of thinking about the talent and the competency of who we had and how we needed to either backfill or grow or bring in talent from the outside. And, like most companies in our industry, we do a ton of promoting from within, but you get to different points where different roles, you do need to bring in some outside expertise to kind of supplement the talent you already have. And he was just always kind of 1 or 2 steps ahead of everybody, trying to think about succession planning very holistically. So when it came to himself, you'd probably have to talk to him to talk about his process, but he spent a lot of time with our outside advisory board, really thinking through the timing of decisions that he wanted to make. And we're a very transparent and open company. And I think from the whole leadership team, he's been very kind of open book with his vision for how the company is going to grow and the talent we need to add to get there. And it's been nice, seeing our whole leadership team embrace, everything that he wanted to put into action.
That's great. Yeah, I know so many owners have a very difficult time knowing when to transition into either their children or to whoever is going to be that person who's going to succeed them. And I see a lot of times they hang on way too long and they just don't, they get themselves into a tough situation and then all of a sudden they panic and they have to scramble. So I can appreciate that forethought.
Well, I think what he shared the story with our whole company, and the story he shared, and somebody told it to him, is, in a race, if you're doing like a 4x100 or a 4x400, there's that baton pass. And what he said is, if the person running with the baton is going very slow and then the person coming up trying to grab the baton is sprinting, they're going to fumble the handoff. But he said if the person with the baton is running very fast and the person trying to get the handoff is not fast enough, they'll never make the handoff because you'll never be able to catch up. And he said the perfect transition happens when 2 people are running at the exact same speed. And he felt like me and him were running at the exact same speed. He is as locked in, fully engaged as he's ever been. I feel like he's right in his prime. And I feel like I'm kind of coming into my own right now where I'm really focused and as all in as can be. So the fact that we're handing off different duties or maybe changing up the reporting structure. He's still our chairman and CEO, but he is still very actively involved in the day-to-day and is energized as ever. Now, his role's obviously changing a little bit. He's a little less direct reports, maybe a little less hands-on in the weeds, which is fine because I'm able to take that off his plate. But we felt like we're both really running at the same speed right now.
Oh, that's great. No, that's a great analogy. Yeah, I can absolutely see that where maybe that next generation's, sprinting and they're looking to make their mark a lot faster than probably it is healthy for the organization.
Yeah. And I think for us, everybody keeps asking me like, what have I done or what am I excited about doing? And we're very methodical in the way we've planned out, what our next few years are going to look like. We know the big dollar investments we're making. We know the money we're spending. We know that in terms of infrastructure, facilities or big pieces of technology that we're going to bring on board. And the next 2 years are very, very mapped out. So it's not like I could speed things up or try to, make a drastic pivot. I mean, we know it's kind of like a football team that scripts their plays for the first series coming out of halftime. We really know what things are going to look like. So now it's more execution because we, from a strategic standpoint, we're pretty focused on what we need to get done.
Just out of curiosity, how many locations do you all have nowadays?
53.
53. All right, that's a big deal, man. That's
in our 54th. We just purchased a 54th and getting that up and running.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty serious. I mean, you have to be organized to be able to pull that one off.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could just, segue a little bit here, I stumbled across the 40 fundamentals and, you've got videos going back, from, I think, was it 2020 was the first, 2019, 2020 were the first, videos that explain the 40 fundamentals?
So we started doing the fundamentals actually probably even before then. It was probably closer to 2015 or 2016.
Okay.
We didn't start filming them. At first, it was just kind of an email message that somebody would send out each week. And a lot of companies now I think are familiar with this because it's been being done in our industry. But we came up with 40, we call them fundamentals, but it's really actions and behaviors. And those are, things that if people live and do every day, it helps us live our 5 core values. So we pick one, we talk about it every day of the week until the next week, in which case we go to the next fundamental. And then once we get through all 40, we start back over at number 1. So it's been great. It's probably been one of the most impactful things we've done as a company. And it's been fun to see people embrace them as much as they have.
How did it start?
It was actually through Vistage. My dad saw a speaker. It was a gentleman that kind of invented the concept.
Okay.
And my dad, over a course of many years, saw hundreds of speakers. And it was, he always says one of the top 2 we ever saw. And we hired him and he helped us develop it. And it's been kind of, we haven't looked back since we did it.
Oh, that's great. No, I looked through these and the first one that really jumped out at me was practice transparency. And could you talk a little bit about that? I saw your video take on it, but I'd love to, love to talk a little bit more about this one. This one intrigued me.
Yeah. So that's probably the one I think we might do as well as any of them. It's definitely a strength for us. They're not all strengths for us, by the way, but that one is. And we try to be as transparent of a company as we can. I think there's a lot of people that leave companies because they have no idea what the vision is or the strategy or why things happen. And, we've always tried to over communicate, but not only over communicate, do it in a way where we're focused on the most important things. And me and my dad, we do a monthly through YouTube TV. We do a kind of about a 45-minute broadcast where it's, some people would say like a State of the Union, where we just really go through open book in terms of financials. Our people know top line, bottom line, everything. We don't hold anything back. We do a lot of strategy, big key initiatives, organizational updates, announcements, a lot of topics on strategy, a ton of recognition, and then some Q&A. And it's been, we've been doing that now. We call it Famous Live for many, many years. And it's probably my favorite day of the month because we really get to share everything that we're so excited about and passionate about. And I really do think our associates appreciate that they're highly integrated into what our strategy is. I mean, I really don't think there's any secrets. And there's obviously going to be some things that we have NDAs with supplier. I mean, there's certain things you have to be, you can't be transparent about, but as much as we can be, we try to be. And sometimes we're probably even a little bit too transparent or too trusting, but it's
sure.
The benefit outweighs the few times you get burned.
I tend to be very transparent in all things. And again, that's how I was raised in my family business. One of the things that I've been preaching, for the last 20 years that I've been out on the road sharing is this opening of financials, to all associates, really being highly transparent with this. And it was really shocking to me when I left the family business and started going out and teaching is how many companies did not share financials. I mean, it was a really closely guarded secret, especially like an income statement. And it didn't make any sense to me. I just didn't understand that. And I guess, what were the benefits for you when you all do this? I mean, you've been doing it now for quite a while, but
Yeah.
I guess, how does it improve management? How can these folks operate better?
Well, to some degree, I mean, we've had a lot of people that have came to our company after, working for big companies where they had no idea what was going on. And a lot of people say, my last job, I felt like a number. I felt like I didn't know what's going on. And I think sharing the financials, that's kind of the ultimate level of trust. And there's just a human component of it where people like working for a business that is open about that. Everybody has to manage their own finances, right? A lot of people have their own budgets and, people have to pay off credit cards and, mortgage payments. People understand financials. It's not like this crazy complex thing. And I think a lot of businesses say, well, not everybody will understand it. Well, if you can explain it the right way, everybody understands, when we're doing well, it's a good thing. And people, we do a team bonus where we share in our success. So the more profitable they are, we have a very, very nice profit sharing program with their associates. And it's just something that it's hard to describe or even fathom a world where we didn't do that.
Exactly. That was kind of my shock as I came out of the business. I was like, really? You all don't share this? And I think you're right that there is that feeling sometimes, because I've really tried to dive into why somebody wouldn't do it. And I think there is that feeling that, well, they just wouldn't understand it. And I'm like, wait a minute, man. Look, if I can figure this out, if I can look at top line and getting down to bottom line, I'm pretty sure everybody, regardless of position, experience, education, can figure this out. This is not, an income statement is not complicated.
Yeah.
Unless we make it so.
Yeah.
And I agree. So I also came from a profit sharing, company. And so, the bottom line was important. Everybody had to know what that was. And I still find companies that, are so top line focused. And I just, I've never understood that one either. I'm a gross profit guy, and every metric is against gross profit. I mean, I don't understand why we're caring so much about top line sales.
Yeah.
Another one of the fundamentals that came out, kind of caught my attention was share the why. Could you expand on this one a little bit?
Yeah. So I think share the why probably goes very hand in hand with the practice transparency.
Yeah.
Share the why you can really use as often as you need to. But for us, we want our associates to know that we're making really thoughtful decisions. And just because we make a decision doesn't mean everybody's going to like it, right? Sometimes as businesses, you have to make tough decisions. And, as long as you're transparent, that's great. But also people want to understand why you made that decision. And a lot of times people are more open to things if they understand the rationale behind it. And if you say, we're going to do this and, someone gets upset, well, if you shared why that happened, that you get a lot more buy-in to the decision. So we've really just tried to ingrain that throughout our whole culture. And I think we get the benefit of the doubt from a lot of our associates when we make tough decisions because we've built up a lot of trust that they know that we care. Our first fundamental is do the right thing always. And every decision we make, we want our associates to know that we're doing it for them, for our customers. It's for our associates and for our customers, 1 and 2. And that's really what builds trust. And sharing the why is a reason why I believe our associates trust us as often as they do.
And, this is something that's come up for me in the last, probably 5 to 7 years, the why. And, it's kind of started with that, the Simon Sinek, somebody shared, Simon Sinek, and everything comes back to the why. But I think that there is an expectation, especially from the younger people, younger generations in our organizations. I would say probably your generation and even the Gen Zs that are coming in, is their expectation is you're going to explain why. Maybe people in my generation or older said, okay, I'm just going to accept that, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And yes, my generation is very famous for questioning authority and bucking the system, but we didn't always ask for that kind of explanation or transparency out of that. But I think, people, again, of your generation and younger require that of us now.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Frankly, from a retention tool. I think this is what jumped out at me here is the retention side of this. I mean, that's one of the biggest struggles a lot of us have is the retaining of good associates. And the why is kind of one of those amazing hidden retention tools.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into retention. We're proud of the longevity of the associates we have. And I think on our industry, it's a lot of family businesses. And I think there's a lot of companies that could be very proud of the retention that they have. The transparency is a huge factor. For us, a lot of it goes with the promotion from within. We've done a really good job at that historically. We're not a company that you need a degree to get promoted or you need this or that. It's really a meritocracy. I mean, we have some incredibly talented people that have risen through the ranks in a really rapid pace. And I think people know that the more effort you put in, the more you get out of Famous. And I think that's really contributed to the lack of turnover. But yeah, sharing the why and being transparent it definitely helps too. In today's day and age, people see layoffs. There's been some national wholesalers in our space that have laid off a lot of people and, retail and, anytime, you're beholden to a stock price, there could be a downturn or a layoff. People know that at Famous, they always know where we stand. We've been in business 91 years. They see the bottom line. They know we're making the right investments. They know we're trying to make strategic investments so we continue to be ahead of the curve. They see that we're taking market share. And I think that makes people want to be a part of Famous. Being part of the culture and the company is great, but they know that, we're going to be around in, another 90 years. And we go as far as, they see a lot of our, competitors or people in our industry have been bought out and they know what happens with private equity gets involved. And I think people know that our family, we're in this for the long haul. And I think that is very comforting for people to hear that.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think you're dead on again with the transparency and being willing to explain. I think, that's the other thing is if you can't explain the why, maybe you need to go back and think about what you're really doing. Maybe that's kind of a half-baked idea.
Yeah.
I try to share this with branch managers quite a bit, and you've got 54 of them to share this with and to really understand that is that if they can't explain the why to their associates and the people in those locations, not a whole heck of a lot's going to get done.
Yeah. And that's why we think that the Famous Live that we do is so valuable because then we're able to share the same message with everybody and everybody hears it versus trying to rely on the cascading communication where sometimes things can get, lost in translation. But we also have, incredible branch managers and leadership that, I feel very strongly could articulate our strategy as well as I can.
No, that's great. If I could just hit one more of them that kind of jumped out at me, be in the gray zone.
Yeah. That one is that's a personality trait.
Okay.
That is something that can't be taught. I've seen people evolve. It's a tricky one though. I mean, if you're a black and white person, it's like pulling teeth to become in the gray zone. And when we're hiring and firing, that's something that it jumps off the page. And we really try to infuse our organization, people that are in the gray zone. I don't know. I go to a restaurant, at 11 o'clock and it's 11:02 and I want to get eggs. And the person at the cashier says, we stopped serving breakfast at 11 and it's 11:02. And it's like, well, you have the eggs and I know I missed it by 2 minutes. Please.
Can you just help me out here?
And they just say no. And, that's just somebody that's so policy driven that they won't bend the rules or they won't use common sense or judgment. They're not a great fit at Famous. Yeah. And it's tough. It's just our industry. It's not black and white. You need to make judgment calls. You need to do things maybe that aren't the best for the P&L, but are best for the customer. And you need to look at every situation and be able to use common sense and judgment. People that usually have great judgment love this one. And there are people, look, we have some people in different departments, whether it's, accounting or that may be a little bit less gray and might be more black and white. That's fine. You need people that have a little bit of both. But in the right roles, being in the gray zone is really, really important for us.
Brian, my father used to say, and this is something he said, when I was at a very young age, he said, learn to be a broken field runner. And it took me a while to figure out what that was. And it's like, look, anybody can be a rock star if the defense stands still. Anybody can score. But if they move around, how do you adapt? And how do you learn to go around that wall or go around that person? So yeah, I absolutely believe that policies are good, but not at the detriment of customer service, at the detriment of having a good culture.
Yeah. We try to not use the word policy. We don't even say it. Do we have policies? A few. I mean, we try to say we have guidelines. We really try to encourage people to use judgment. I mean, there are certain things you need a policy for, right? You know,
For sure.
But if we don't need a policy, we're going to have a guideline.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think, just the three ones that I picked out, and obviously, there's all the rest of them that, really define your organization and really, drive that forward. But those three kind of felt like they went together, and rolled in there together. And I think, one of the things that really jumped out at me about, the recordings of these, the brief recordings was, it wasn't just you, your dad, or that senior leadership. I saw one that was doing the practice transparency in your marketing lead, and she did the same topic. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's really cool to get their take on what these things mean.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, there's some I do really well. There's other ones that I struggle with and need to get better at.
Sure.
We have different people in the organization that are great at these fundamentals. And reality is, if there's 40 of them, there's probably 3 or 4 that I'm elite at, and maybe another half dozen I do very well, and other ones I need improvement. So we have so many people that are great at all 40 that we really wanted to highlight our associates. And also, it's a great way for people to kind of virtually meet people. If somebody, works in our Wheeling branch, they get to, over the course of a year, kind of meet 51 people they never would have met before and get to kind of understand who they are and their personality. And especially they might interact with them through email or through our messages at work, but they never see their face or hear their voice. So that's been fun getting people on camera. And I'm always impressed by how camera ready everyone is. I film them and, sometimes stumble through, and it takes me a couple takes to get it done right. And we have associates that are never on camera, never give speeches, and they just knock it out of the park. So that always impresses me.
Hidden talents, man. You just you never knew.
Even the one we did this weekend, it was somebody from our cabinet production facility. Yeah. And I mean, you would have honestly thought he was a paid actor. He was that good.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that was fun to see.
Nice. So you just wrapped up your board commitment or whatnot with Hardy. How long was that? 3 years or something?
I think it was just 2.
Just 2 years?
Yeah,
okay.
I think it was 2 years.
Okay. So why did you raise your hand? Why did you say, I want to be a part of this?
It's an interesting question. I don't remember exactly what transpired. Somebody may have nominated me, and I think they may have reached out to me, and then they asked me if I was interested, at which point I went through a whole interview process. And it was more that I was kind of curious about Hardy, what went on behind the scenes. And what was interesting about it is I always felt, I'll give you my personal kind of take on it, and
please.
Take it for what you will, but we have buying groups, AD, Blue Hawk, Embassy, all these buying groups. And then we have ASA Hardy. And I felt like there was this encroachment where buying groups were trying to be advocacy organizations, industry groups were trying to get into what the buying groups are doing. And it just felt like the lines were getting very blurred. And for me, I was thinking, I want to make sure AD and, the other buying groups are going to be relevant in 20 years. And I want to make sure that Hardy and ASA and all these groups are still relevant. And I think the best way to do that is to have that key areas that you focus on and really do those really well. So my kind of very naive thought was, if I can get on the board, at least I can have a say and share my opinions in terms of what should Hardy double down on and really focus on. And then maybe what are some areas that Hardy should really back away, because Hardy is just at this point, I guess, a Me Too player with some of the buying groups. And when I got on board and actually joined the board, I was kind of privy to the strategic plans of Hardy, all the things that the organization was working on. And they were probably way more well-defined than really what I think I realized. And I think it was a very eye-opening experience for me. And I think I gave a lot of thoughts and opinions that were very well listened to, if you will. And I think Hardy does a great job of listening. Talbot does a wonderful job. Zach Purge, who I believe does a wonderful job. Yeah. They really have their pulse on what the industry wants and needs. Yeah. And they're steering the ship, as all those organizations are, to make sure they provide the best value for their members. And it was a great experience to be a small piece of hopefully giving them some insights in terms of where I thought the focus should be. And if you think about what Hardy's done for our industry in terms of the value they provide, it's off the charts, and it's only going to get better. And Hardy, not to get too much into the weeds, they really have kind of 4 pillars of things that they're focusing on. And I think the reason they're going to be successful is because they're laser focused on those 4 things. And they're not trying to get into a 5th or a 6th or a 7th vertical. It's really focusing. And it's just like any business, you want to focus on what you do well and be world-class at it. And they have a great plan. And it was kind of fun to watch.
Well, I think it's great to come in from the insider perspective on where the organization's going.
Yeah. I could not have more confidence in Hardy as an organization after my time on the board.
Yeah. So how does somebody get nominated, or do you even know? I mean, how do you get to be a part of this? Because I know a lot of my audience, especially younger people, don't know how to get involved.
You could reach out to anybody on the board and tell them you have an interest, and they keep kind of a running tab of different people that they're interested in. So if you reach out to anybody on the Hardy board and say, hey, I'd be interested in this, they would put you in a process where you'd be able to talk to different members and possibly go through the interview process. But I would say I can only really speak to Hardy, not ASA, but
sure.
There's so many industry changes happening from a regulatory standpoint, from a governance standpoint, where if people truly have interest in that piece of the business, that's going to be kind of the make or break. And that's where I think Hardy right now is providing a tremendous amount of value. I don't think people even see behind the scenes where the dollars are going at Hardy to advocating for distributors to help us continue to make our industry sustainable, but also we provide products to homeowners at the end of the day. I mean, it's going through contractors, but everything ends up in a house. And with inflation and all these issues going on in the world, Hardy is fighting on our behalf to make sure that our government understands the ramifications of the changes they make. They've made so many regulatory changes that really hit people in their wallets and really have a lot of unintended consequences. And Hardy not only has distributors, contractors, but also homeowners in mind as they help lobby on behalf of our industry. So anybody that wants to get involved, I highly suggest you reach out, and trust me, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you just kind of defined one of the distinctions between buying group and association is that advocacy part, that governmental advocacy part. So, and which, Talbot's very adept at. I mean, he digs on that. And that's his world, man.
Yeah.
He
and
loves
it's
that
funny because now you're seeing a lot of the buying groups are trying to stand up an advocacy pillar, which is fine. And there are certain things the buying groups do very well. Manufacturer training. Okay. Well, the industry organizations are trying to do that. So you're always going to have this bleed and this overlap, but I think it kind of gets down to what can you be world-class at and doubling down on that. And Hardy's advocacy team and commitment, we're very lucky that we have Hardy fighting for distributors every day.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's been a wonderful organization. In fact, I've said this probably on the show a couple of times, but Don Frenberg, who, was previous to Talbot, he gave me my first gig. So, I always have a special place for Hardy in my world. So
that's great.
Anyway, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time, man. This has been a pleasure. Loved hearing about, the things you're doing. And I'm really excited to watch, where you're going at this point, such a solid foundation, to spring from. And, number 54 coming on, and who knows what the next year is going to bring you. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. All right, my friend. Well, hopefully our paths cross in the future.
Awesome.
Take care. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.